Hi everyone, my name is Hugh and welcome back to another video. Now, since the Osmo was released late last year, it has kind of taken the world by storm as a very compact, easy to use, ultra stable and downright awesome little camera. Now this thing has been incredibly popular and has sold like hotcakes. Good move, DJI. It was a fantastic upgrade from the previous Osmo and I've just loved mine. Now the Osmo Pocket 3 does great quality video. It'll let you shoot in 4K, it has a relatively decent dynamic range, great autofocus, a whole host of features, and obviously it's got an inbuilt gimbal as well, so it'll give you super steady footage. But a lot of you still aren't getting the results that you want. Your footage is looking a bit dull, not so cinematic, and you're kind of left a little bit underwhelmed by the Osmo Pocket 3.
Smile at the camera.
So in this video, I'm going to share with you a few reasons that might be getting in the way of you achieving proper cinematic, nice, vibrant footage from your Osmo Pocket 3. Now, whilst the Osmo is great for vlogging, one major drawback is that the fixed focal length 20mm lens is kind of difficult to work with in a lot of situations. When I'm shooting with my DSLR cameras like the R5C, I'm usually shooting with the zoom lens like the 24-70, the 15-35, or else the 70-200. So I've got a lot of different ranges there from super wide right through to very long reach telephoto. But with the Osmo Pocket 3, I've just got about a 20mm lens to work with. And sorry to say guys, but the digital zoom on the Osmo Pocket 3 just doesn't cut it for me. So when you're out shooting with your Osmo Pocket 3 and you're pointing the camera around, a lot of stuff is going to be very small in the image. The mountains in the background are going to be very far away and very slim. Buildings again are going to be small. And you're just going to get this sort of generic wide angle of everything. Now, how do you get around filming with that 20mm, slightly boring field of view that the Osmo Pocket 3 has? Well, my first suggestion would be to actually film close to stuff and move the camera past things that are in the foreground. Now you can do that sort of laterally, or you can do a projection type shot, also known as a push shot. Or you can even do drop down shots. What I'm basically saying is, try and create depth in your shot. And don't just randomly point the camera at what you see in front of you. A scene that has a little bit of variety in composition, with different objects at various distances to the camera, will create more interest. Now you can do this by holding the Osmo Pocket 3 on its own in your hand. That's perfectly fine and it's what it's designed for. But you can also actually just fit the camera with some sort of wand, some sort of tool that will give you an extra little bit of reach. Now the 20mm or so equivalent lens on the Osmo Pocket 3 will also create another little problem for you, particularly when you're shooting outside, in that it will usually reveal the sky behind you. And generally speaking with the Osmo Pocket 3, you'll find yourself on auto exposure mode. So if you're shooting outside, a large area of the image tends to be the sky with you in the foreground. Now that's all well and good if you have a nice blue sky or if the sun is hitting you and you're holding the camera in the right direction so that the light looks nice. But very often on cloudy days, which we get a lot of here in Ireland, you're going to have this big light grey, white block of sky in all your shots, and the camera's going to be trying to expose for that, and then you're in the foreground and you're totally blacked out, and it just renders horrible footage. And this isn't going to just happen with your Osmo Pocket 3, it'll really happen with any camera. But the thing is with the DSLR like my R5C, which I'm filming on here, I have better controls on the exposure, plus the camera has more dynamic range also. So how do you get around that? Well, my advice is that when you're shooting outside and you're vlogging with yourself and stuff, just be mindful of the exposure and how much sky you're getting in the shot. Even if it means lifting the camera up and pointing it downwards, try and eliminate that sort of 50% sky out of the shot and point the camera down a little bit more. Or even face the camera so that you're not up against sky and that you've got some, foliage or buildings to one side of you. That way you're going to reduce the dynamic range of the image and the camera is going to expose for you as opposed to exposing for the sky. And I guarantee you, your images will start to look much nicer if you can kind of stick to that. And likewise, when the sun is shining as well, before you start shooting yourself, just kind of think about where the sun is in the sky and figure out what angle it's going to catch you to look nice on camera. Usually if you're shooting yourself this way into the left hand side of your face, it's going to look nice if the sun is coming in from this angle, similar to how I'm actually lighting this here. It looks nice if the sun is actually bringing out the shape of your face. Now sometimes you're walking in a certain direction and the sun will be behind you and it's difficult to work around that. And if that's the case, just try and move your hand so that you can get the light to sort of work well on your face and avail of a composition. Now speaking of composition, I think a lot of people fall down with the Osmo Pocket 3 in terms of composition when they're out vlogging. Because generally when you're vlogging, you just tend to point the camera towards you like I'm doing here. The face tracking will likely kick in and you'll end up perfectly centered in the middle of the frame. Now that's perfectly fine for capturing what you want to say to camera, but if you want to create a nicer looking image, sort of reframe yourself so that you're a little bit to one side of the camera. Now this is like the rule of thirds. You'll see this all the time in movies. Anytime there's two people conversing or it shows a person, you'll always notice that they're usually to one side. In very rare cases are they dead center in the image unless it's intentional. So just try and frame the camera, even if you're vlogging, even if you're pointing it at yourself, try and just push yourself off to one side. I guarantee you that it will look more cinematic, it'll look like a nicer composition, and your videos will start to look nicer and more interesting if you do that. Hello. Now composition isn't just all about filming yourself, it's very important too when you flip the camera around and you film what's in front of you to just be mindful of what you're filming. Because when you have the camera set in horizon lock mode, which is what most people have, generally speaking the camera will just be perfectly dead level, and that way the horizon is going to be halfway up through your frame. And as I said, with pointing the camera towards yourself, it's generally nicer if you comply to the sort of rule of thirds or there or thereabouts type of composition. In other words, either give priority to the foreground and the land or else the sky. So it's always a good idea to get that horizon line a little bit up or down in the image to kind of get that rule of thirds thing going on. Now one of the big selling points for the Osmo Pocket 3 is the fact that it's a gimbal and that you don't need this big heavy mirrorless on a heavy gimbal holding it out here. It's just a lightweight little package that you can hold for a long time. But that also creates a set of problems for the Osmo Pocket 3. It can be a little bit more difficult to suck up the vibrations. You're going to pick up a bit of body movement in the shot, and you won't always feel like putting a huge effort into walking super steady as well. You'll just kind of want to walk with it. So using some sort of selfie stick, I find with the Osmo Pocket 3 can actually help you with sucking up the movement. When I'm vlogging with the Osmo Pocket 3, I actually just use my old selfie stick from the Osmo Action 2. It's a little flimsy, but it's light and compact and it does the job fine. But sometimes a more substantial solution will do a better job. This is a carbon fiber monopod that's kind of inverted here, and at the top I have a plate in which I have my handle for the Osmo Pocket 3 ready to take the Osmo Pocket 3, and if I push that in there I feel 2 clicks. 2 clicks is always good. This is more of a pole, isn't it? I'm sitting down now and I'm actually reaching up to a 9-foot ceiling, and I'm just dropping it down like a fishing rod. And I have a nice smooth crane shot, and just look at that messy table. Now you're going to see a little bit of movement. It's not going to be perfectly stable, but it is a very, very cool way of getting cinematic shots. And you know, if you've got one of these monopods lying around, why not adapt it? Now one thing I love about this is anytime you project the camera, and even if the camera is, you know, 6 or 7 feet away, I can see exactly what I'm shooting. And I like this way of working. Now obviously this is very cumbersome and it's not ideal for shooting all the time, but if you do want cinematic images and you're out and about with your Osmo Pocket 3, why not just try it? You don't need to use it for every shot, but it is a cool way of shooting. When you're shooting with the Osmo Pocket 3, the screen on it is very handy. You flick it out, you switch the camera on, and it's a nice addition to the camera. It's better than previous incarnations of Osmos. But sometimes if you're holding the camera a bit away from you, if it's on a selfie stick or on a monopod or something like that, it's very, very difficult to see the screen, and it's also very, very difficult to actually see which way the camera is facing because it's a little black cylinder like that. So it's a good idea then to use your phone in conjunction with your Osmo Pocket 3 and use the Nemo app on there to help you compose and expose an image, because that app is great and it's nice to use it if you can. Now I've put together this very, very crude example of a mini rig using some spider crabs, or one spider crab, from iFootage. And as you can see, it's not that ergonomic, but you know what? It's actually perfectly usable. And if I just turn that around now, I can actually use that to film. And I'm filming here in probably a wrong setting, but it's given me a nice idea of what I'm actually shooting. If you look here, you will see there's a nice histogram on the screen, and that's going to help me expose myself nicely in the image. So look, you're not going to do it every time. I don't believe the Osmo is designed to be used in a rig or used with your mobile phone all the time. But if you do want to shoot a cinematic image, composition is everything. So using the phone is a good idea. I popped out onto the deck here just to get a little bit of vitamin D. Very nice. The Osmo Pocket 3, like a lot of smaller action cameras and smaller drone cameras, doesn't have an adjustable aperture, meaning that you're kind of stuck on the fixed aperture of the camera, which I think is about f2 in the Osmo Pocket 3. Therefore, it's going to expose the image for you, either by increasing the shutter speed if it's bright outside, and if it's darker, it's going to increase the ISO. Now, a lot of Osmo users are going to be using this outside. That's just the nature of the camera. Most stuff on an Osmo will probably be filmed outside, and that's where ND filters come in. Now, these are readily available from a multitude of companies, and I recently got ND filters from Freewell. Now, usually these filters will come in different strengths, and if you can slow down your shutter to a sort of industry standard, you know, about a 50th or a 60th of a second, then it's going to give you that nice little bit of motion blur, which will actually help you get a more cinematic image. Now, ND filters don't matter as much when you're far away from stuff because the motion blur isn't going to be as evident. But if you're moving the Osmo Pocket 3 fairly close to stuff that's in the foreground, or if you're in a vehicle or on a bike, you're going to have a lot of action going past you faster, and that's when the importance of the ND filter really kicks in. It's when you have foreground moving past and the background behind that won't be moving as much, so it's going to be much clearer, and that's going to give you a very, very desirable cinematic effect. Okay. As the Osmo Pocket 3 is primarily a handheld gimbal orientated type of vlogging camera, you'll find that you use it mostly in the hand, but it's a very good idea to use your Osmo in locked off static shots. Whether you mount it to a standard tripod or just use the one that comes with it and let it stand on something. When viewing the Osmo content I got on my Spain and Portugal trip, I noticed that some of my favourite shots were the ones where I wasn't holding the Osmo in the hand, although I hadn't put much thought into the shots. I just found the composition was nice, and with static shots where the camera isn't moving, it'll give the viewer a chance to just look at the image rather than constant movement. One thing I love about the Osmo Pocket 3 is how well it autofocuses, be it on yourself or the subject you're filming. It's really reliable. Now, the main focus mode that people will use on the Osmo Pocket 3 is the continuous focus, which automatically picks up your face or the subject that's nearest the camera. This is by far the most convenient method to film on the Osmo. But if you're moving the Osmo past items close to the camera, then the focus is going to jump as soon as the camera passes it. Now, I made the mistake of filming a few scenes recently without changing this focus mode first. Single focus mode will work better in certain situations, as will tracking a subject, because it'll lock onto focus. So my advice would be to play around with the focus settings and just get used to what works best for you. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is that in terms of cinematics, when you're moving with the camera, a wider angle lens is going to give you a slightly nicer result in that it shows more of the peripheral part of the image, left and right, top and bottom. You are going to get a slightly more cinematic result if you use a wider angle lens, I guarantee you, because the stuff either side is more visible, and that's the part of the image that's closer to you. So a wider angle lens on the Osmo Pocket 3 is a good idea if you're sort of filming on a bike, on scooters, on one wheels, things like that. Definitely look at getting the wide angle lens if you don't have it already. It is a nice addition, and if you get the Freewell one, it's going to allow you to attach a filter to it as well, which in my opinion is kind of necessary when you're shooting outside. Now, if you want to take a step further, you could look at getting an anamorphic lens for your Osmo Pocket 3. When Freewell sent me this anamorphic lens and filter kit, I actually didn't think I would use it at all. But then I remembered that I actually like to upload to YouTube in 4K DCI, which is a wider aspect ratio than the standard 16:9 ratio that the Osmo films with. What I'm basically saying is that if I use an anamorphic lens on the Osmo Pocket 3, I can stretch the image horizontally by about 10%, which means that I can upload in 4K DCI or even slightly wider if I want, without cropping the top and bottom off the image. and I feel that it actually creates a slightly more cinematic look with the Osmo. Since I got my Osmo Pocket 3, one thing that never worked out well for me was the actual joystick. It's very small and I find it hard to get smooth results when I'm panning and tilting with it to track a subject. Therefore, I find you'll actually get much better results just using the tracking feature on the Osmo Pocket. Now, the tracking is pretty much essential if you're using long selfie sticks, but just look at the effects you can get. I'd never have got this shot of Ryan only for I tracked him using the tracking feature on the Osmo. And of course, remember you can track yourself when you got the Osmo on a tripod as well. But my advice would be not to use it too much. Hello. I want to mention some particularly bad habits that you can get into when filming with the Osmo Pocket 3. The first one is one I'm really guilty of myself, and it's caused me a bit of frustration when I'm looking back at my footage. And that is just press and record too much. Good morning, friends. Welcome back to another video. Because the Osmo is just so quick and easy to use, you'll find yourself, well, overusing it. And I can't tell you how many times I've just picked up this camera and pressed record and started randomly filming nothing important.
Do you like my toilet? Yeah? It's nice, isn't it?
I'm filling up my cards, I'm ending up with all this kind of uninteresting footage where I'm just yapping to camera and making no sense whatsoever. So my advice would be to definitely think about what you want to shoot first and what you want to say. And another thing equally annoying for me is how I kind of get lazy with this camera and just forget about the composition completely. Almost all my footage from my Spain trip, where I'm talking to camera, I'm holding the Osmo just too low and I'm not thinking about the actual composition. Like what I said earlier on about just holding the camera properly so that you're in the frame, a little bit off center, and you create a nice image which shows the scene behind you. Rather than doing that, I've just been kind of holding the camera and just walking around randomly talking. And therefore I've ended up with all this kind of boring footage that I just don't want. So think before you shoot. I don't normally like buying bottles of water like this, but in this case, I'm going to have to make an exception. The Osmo Pocket 3 might be a personal handheld gimbal style vlogging camera, but it will respond in the very same way as the most expensive cinema camera in that it'll look better if there's a nicer composition and nicer lighting in the image. If you could put that extra minute or two into composing the image and coming up with something that you think will look nice, it's going to look so much better than if you just whip out the camera and start filming. So always think first what you want to shoot. Think of where the light is coming from. Think of what way you can move the camera and what's going to yield best results. Thanks for watching, guys. Sub if you haven't already, and until next time, I'll see you.